As I mentioned in my last video, Butterfly Kisses for Grandma and Grandpa was born out of the struggle and longing that I experienced as a remote grandparent, and my dedication to ensuring that our granddaughter Elle felt the love, um, my husband and my love, when we couldn't be together. So it started on her third birthday, where I made a homemade book for her and gave it to her for her birthday, and I'm going to share that book with you today. This was the cover, Close to You, and then I put the end at the end of the book, and I had these photo pages at the end of the book, so she would always have those memories. I have to admit that I'm very brave sharing my beautiful artwork with everyone. Um, so this just started out as a um, private, personal thing for our granddaughter, and it blossomed into something else, which I'll talk about later. So it started out with, you have to fly on an airplane to get to Grandma and Grandpa's house, but we really are not far away. By the way, this was the very first children's book that I ever wrote. When the sun rises high up in the sky to brighten your day, that same sun is shining at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Look up at the sun and remember, we are near. You are the sun that warms our hearts. When you go outside and see birds fly and hear them sing, remember, Grandma and Grandpa are close to you. You are the song in our hearts. We send you our love on the wings of every bird. Anytime you see a flower, imagine Grandma and Grandpa's faces smiling at you, and be sure to smile back. Remember, we are close to you. Your smiles are the flowers in the garden of our hearts. When you feel the wind blow across your cheek, remember, Grandma and Grandpa are close to you. We send our hugs and kisses to you on the wind. When something makes you laugh, feel the joy and remember, Grandma and Grandpa are close to you. You are our laughter and our joy. When we place our hands upon our chest, we feel our hearts overflow with love for you. Put your hand upon your chest and feel the warm, pure love in your heart. Remember, Grandma and Grandpa are close to you. When the sun goes down and the sky turns dark, look up at the twinkling stars and mellow moon. The same stars twinkle and the same moon shines at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Remember, we are close to you, and we love you more than all the stars in the sky. Thoughts of you bring us peace both day and night. We always hold you close in our hearts, and we have sweet dreams of you every night. Every morning the sun awakens us and keeps us close to you, the sunshine of our lives. Little did I know how much I had to learn. Now, with my experience and knowledge, I can see all kinds of wrong with this book, but it doesn't really bother me because it wasn't intended to be published. It was something from my heart to my granddaughter. I'll talk about this some more in a little bit. So even though there was all kinds of wrong with my homemade book, it touched the people at the party, and they were crying. I really thought I had something there, and they well, saying, you have to get this published, you have to get this published. Well, time went by, and my husband kept saying, you have to get this published. And I said, I don't know the first thing about publishing. Well, my husband being the husband that he is, he said he's got 40 years of marketing. He's a businessman. He's just that type of person. And he said, I'll figure it out. We're going to start a publishing company. That's how Blue Wall Press was born. And he really dug in, and he learned all about publishing. Uh, you can find uh, posts on my blog that he wrote about what it took and what he had to learn and what we had to accomplish. Um, so I started looking at the book a little deeper, and I looked at this first spread or first page, and I thought, well, it needs to be made a little more universal. Um, and I played around with the following, having pictures from various transportation spread across pages. With the text, you have to travel to get to Grandma and Grandpa's house. You might fly on an airplane, take a bus or train, or ride in a car. No matter how far you have to travel, Grandma and Grandpa are close to you. I never intended to, if I was going to get it published or submit it or whatever, I never intended to do the art. I wanted something more professional. But I did have a clear vision, and at that time, I didn't understand that really, as an author, I'm not going to have much say regarding what happens with the art. And I think that's a really important lesson for authors. It's something that almost every one of the Blue Wall Press authors kind of had to learn. Because when we write books, we have clear visions of what we think the book is supposed to look like, and it's really hard to let go of those visions. But generally, when you let the illustrator do their job, you end up with a much better book and some great surprises. So here, I was going to dictate that you're going to have a single illustration bridging pages, because I didn't know it was called a spread at the time. In addition to clouds and wind illustration, it's going to have on the left Grandma and Grandpa on the ground with their arms around each other, blowing kisses to the clouds. So as you can see, I was going to tell everyone how this book was going to be done. Uh, I decided that we needed a little bit more here, so I decided we were going to have a single illustration bridging pages. On the right of the illustration, the little girl would be on the ground looking up at the clouds and touching her cheek. Here, let's see, the page was going to include an illustration of grandparents with a female grandchild. And here we're going to have a new illustration of grandparents with hands over hearts or something along those lines. And here we were going to have a new illustration with nature and a river of love. So once I actually accepted the idea that perhaps the book could get published, I knew it wasn't ready to be published. But I really wasn't sure what my next step would be. So I bought a bunch of books. How to write a children's book and get it published, writing for children and teenagers, writing children's books for dummies, writing books for kids and teens. Well, the problem with most of those books, in my opinion today, for me, where I was at, was they covered all the age groups of children's books. And what I wanted to write was a picture book. I needed a book like Ann Whitford Paul's book, what is it, picture book writing? Nope, writing picture books. And little did I know, I also needed to take some courses and other things. But I had a starting point. I must have went through at least 20 revisions, and then Steve said, well, okay, now we're going to send it to an editor. And he sent it to an editor. And I'll talk about that in a minute. So in those days, many editors were still marking up the manuscript, the actual paper. So I got my manuscript back in the mail, and boy, was it marked up. I thought I would never lose that edit. And I know it's somewhere in my house, but I'm not sure where. And I guess that's what happens when you've moved several times and lived in an RV for 2.5 years and done all the things that I've done since I got that edit. But and I don't remember much about it, other than, of course, it did move me forward, give me ideas on how I could improve the story, which led to about 20 more revisions. The one thing that I will never forget is she suggested that perhaps I might want to consider taking some courses. Wow, what a novel idea. Why didn't I think of that? Well, I'm going to guess that it's because, like many people, I probably thought that writing picture books was easy. Anybody could do it, right? There's limited words. Well, back then, they were accepting up to 1,000 words. Wouldn't that be nice if we had 1,000 words to work with today? That would be, woo, good times. Anyway, the truth is, if you have not written picture books are not easy to write. They're a joy to write, but they're not easy to write. There's a lot to be learned about writing picture books. So eventually I did take courses, not before Butterfly Kisses, but after Butterfly Kisses. I think before Butterfly Kisses was released, I took my first course at the Institute for Children's Literature, I believe. But anyway, that was the best advice anyone gave me. I think that taking courses, reading good books, getting lots of practice, when the time comes, getting critiques, but prior to that, being in a critique group is really important, because then you learn also, from what your critique partners are doing right and wrong, as well as them helping you see what you're doing right and wrong. So there's lots and lots to be learned. Picture book writing is not easy. In my 20 or so revisions, I realized that even though I wanted the story to be kind of from the grandparents' point of view, I really wanted it to be about the grandchild's world. I wanted it to be about the grandchild, not about the grandparents. And my homemade book was all about the grandparents, what they were feeling, what they were thinking, and, this type of thing. So I think that was a really good change to make. Now I'm going to move on to what happened when Steve decided, okay, now we're going to send it off to another editor, but it really ended up being a critique. And here we go. So the critique focused on story arc, which, as you can see from the original, homemade gift book that I made for my granddaughter, there really wasn't any kind of arc. There was a little bit of a, start in the morning and end at night type of thing. But this editor suggested that I change the story from what I had intended, which was a gift book, like On the Night You Were Born, or maybe Someday. That's not what I wanted, but Steve was the publisher, and he said I should do what the editor said, so out came another 15, 20 revisions. Um, it, in some ways, it was good advice because I think that the book within the book is really cool. So the book that I wanted to write is in the middle, and then it's surrounded by the story arc. Um, so it makes a little bit for a unique book, which I think is good. Um, there's certainly nothing wrong with arc. I teach it. I believe in it. Many successful books are written around a traditional arc. So I can understand why she might have suggested that. And, who can mess with fate? I ended up with a beautiful book, and so I think the next thing to do is to go ahead and share the final book. So that will be in my next video.